Okay. So welcome back. It's now 3 o'clock. We're going to start moving on to portfolio experience again, talking about the marking this time. So we've got Dr. Steve Mowat, who's a consultant anaesthetist and deputy college tutor at Northumbria Hospital, and he's also the intermediate teaching lead for A-Line. So Steve, if you could share your slides.
Okay, fine. Can you see my slides? Yep. Okay. Thanks very much, Nina. Hello to everyone who doesn't know me. As you said, I'm one of the anaesthetic consultants in Northumbria. First of all, well done for making it through the meeting, and we've made it through to the last segment now, so you're on the home straight. And what I'm going to try to do today is really just give you a view from the other side of the fence, from the people who will be marking your self-assessment, so that you have the best chance of maximising your marks, and you don't fall into any pitfalls and do yourself down by little issues on the day. How do I move forward? Apologies. Okay, next people. My screen doesn't want to move forward. Can anyone make it work?
Do you want to just try unsharing your screen first of all, and then checking that your slides all work that way?
I've got one as well.
Yeah. And if it doesn't work, we can share them for you, and then try sharing again.
Yeah.
And see if it'll let you click through.
Okay, you should be able to see them again. No, it's not moving.
Okay, no worries. Just stop sharing your screen, and Zoe will click through if you just tell us when you want to move.
Yep. Okay.
And just bear with us while Zoe loads them up.
Okay.
Yeah, crack on.
Okay, great. Apologies, everyone. Right, I've divided the talk up a bit like this. Essentially, I'm going to give you some overview and some general points about how you lay things out, and I've divided it into the Audit QIE research bit, the publications and presentations, and then the personal activities. So next slide, Zoe. Okay, so one of those old adages about going to war or winning a battle is to know thy enemy, and essentially in this context, the enemy is the assessor who's going to be looking at your self-assessment of your portfolio. I think the most important thing to say is that the vast majority of people doing this are not big wigs from the college. They're not college examiners necessarily, but they're ordinary anaesthetists doing this in their own time. We do feel a sort of a really significant weight of responsibility in terms of we're very aware that there's a huge amount riding on this, and there are sleepless nights spent about trying to get things absolutely correct. We do want to give you as many marks as we possibly can within the bounds of the rules that are out there and that are given to us. So the one thing you can do is make it as easy as possible, which sounds obvious, but the realities of life are that people are doing this in their own time, and so there are time pressures. If you open the portfolio and everything's laid out in front of you, it's very, very simple. If you have to go digging, then subconsciously, if in no other way, you tend to end up scoring people less, even if it's just through the organisation marks at the end. And the final thing to say about that is, and this will have been said many times, but you cannot overstate it, that there are 5 marks for the organisation of your portfolio and how you self-assess it. That's got nothing to do with how good your portfolio is and how much stuff you've done in the background and how good your CV is. It's all to do with how you lay it out. And that is the same number of marks as you get for all the audit and QI work you're going to do over the next, or you have done over the last 3 years. If you think about it, that's a huge number of marks. And if you think how much time you spend doing audit and QI work in your, over those years, you really need to spend as much time as you can getting this absolutely perfect and showing it to people and saying, if you were looking at this and this was the mark scheme, would you be unsure about how many marks to give me? Next slide, please. So again, really simple things, but the first thing we see when we click onto it is your CV. There's a bit of a medical thing about, we have a bit of a toe curling English reaction to blowing our own trumpet, but your CV really does matter. Again, there are lots of courses you can do out there about interview technique and that sort of thing. This is essentially, you know, how you look and how you speak when you metaphorically walk into the room and shake hands with the person who's trying to give you a job. You've got to make it look as professional as possible. You know, if that means paying for some sort of online program that will make it look shiny and posh, then go for it, because you cannot really overstate this. And one specific thing I would say is I would write a CV that is specific for this application and mirrors the domains in the self-assessment. So we tend to write CVs, and when you go online and you'll look at how a CV should look, and then you produce a CV, but that doesn't necessarily fit with questions 1, 2, 3, and 4 when you're trying to mark it. So I would literally write it and divide it and make the titles the same as the domains, so that it's really, really obvious to the guy or the girl marking it that this is the marks that you're putting forward for this section. Okay, next slide, please. So it's pretty obvious, but a couple of examples. You know, make it look as professional as you can. Use spacing. Use different coloured fonts, different size fonts to make the bits you want to stand out. Next slide, Zoe. But what I would say is we are all medics, and you don't want to come across like you're a sort of advertising executive. So make it look good, but I would avoid cheesy photos and going over the top, because it is being marked, if you like, by people who are the same as you and who also have a natural aversion to people telling everyone how great they are. So aim for that sweet spot between making it really obvious, making it a really efficient way of getting information across without becoming across as cheesy and annoying. Okay, next slide. Okay, so the next thing is that there is a bit in the guidance that says if the title in the box isn't sufficient to explain why you've scored yourself a certain amount, then you can upload a document labeled domain score explanation for each domain. I would say you should probably, or I would advise doing that for every domain anyway, because your CV, we see at the front, and then we go into your evidence, and then for each domain, we can then refer back to your CV, but that involves clicking in and out of windows, and frankly, it's a bit annoying, and it's a bit of a clunky system. If you have a piece of paper, and it's the first thing you click on that says, this is the evidence I'm putting forward for this section, and this is another thing, is this is the evidence I am not putting forward for this section, which I'll go into in a minute, then it makes it really, really easy to find the bit you want and to know where the marks are, and you don't have to keep dipping back towards your CV and coming back again. So I would put an explanatory piece of paper in for each domain. Next slide, please, Zoe. So, I mean, I won't go into the in-depth side of things about each of the areas because you've already been through it all. I think it's fairly safe to say that with regards to qualifications and prizes, certainly qualifications from the UK, merits and distinctions are fairly self-evident, and you either have them or you don't. Overseas qualifications can be a bit harder, and prizes in particular are a bit of a grey area. With prizes, all I would say is just make it sound academic, because those are where the marks primarily lie. I would, if it's a grey area, I would definitely advise uploading a specific typed explanation of what it involved and who the awarding body was. If you can, and if you have time, get in touch with the awarding body and ask them to either verify your letter or send a letter in, rather than just putting on a certificate, because certificates often have slightly strange titles, and it's difficult to figure out whether they are based on examinations or just based on you doing really well on a poster presentation. So if you can, link it to something that explains exactly what it is, and then link that to why you think it scores a certain number of marks. I've mentioned advice or a letter from the TPD, and I don't know how much people are aware of this. There might be loads of people out there saying, yeah, we do this all the time. But on the old, or on the ST3 applications this time, there was a document where you could get the TPD or your educational supervisor to verify, if you like, a piece of evidence. And I personally found that very useful when assessing things, particularly if there was a bit of evidence which was slightly unusual, which didn't quite fit into a box. You can get the document from it was on the ST3 document store, the application document store, and you could ask the TPD or your ES to complete it ahead of time and sign it. Now I've been in touch with the ANRO people, and I wanted to be able to show you the document, but unfortunately it's been removed from the document store. I believe there will be another version coming out for the ST3, ST4 type applications. So all I would say is have a look for it and use it as much as you can. Next slide, Zoe. Okay, audit QI and research. So again, you'll have been into this in depth before, so I'm not going to go into it, but just it's basic, but make sure you are labeling the correct things as the correct things, because you know, people are doing this in a time pressured situation, and if it isn't obviously research when it should be research, people won't even go any further than that. They'll just stop at that point. The whole significant contribution thing, I'm sure this has been talked to, but you basically have to have 3 elements here. You have to have been the organizer, you have to have been the person in charge of it, not necessarily the single person in charge of it, but the person in charge of it, not just doing some collection for someone else. You have to either close the audit loop or you have to make some changes. And ideally, you have to show evidence that those changes have stuck in practice. So that's what you really need to get 3+ marks. And that's what, when I'm doing it, I sit with the mark scheme next to me, and I have that written down next to me. And if I can put a tick next to each one, then you get, and it goes without saying that you need to present it at the highest level you can. Next slide, Zoe, please. Okay, publications versus presentations. Again, you've had in-depth explanations about these. It is a really difficult area to assess, and it's the one area where I have spent hours going round and round in circles trying to figure out which project people want to use for which bit of the application process. So you probably know the rules, but here they are. You can't have a presentation and a publication for the same project. You can't use them both to score in both areas. You can have a publication of an audit or a QI project, but only if it's in a peer-reviewed publication. And you can have a presentation of an audit, but you can't then score it for the presentation and for the audit. So what this comes down to is you're going to essentially need, you can just about do it with 2, but you're probably going to need 3 separate projects. And certainly if you're talking about 3 years work, you need 1 for each year anyway. So you're probably going to need 3 projects. And again, it's very difficult to do. And I can't say that I did this when I was a trainee, but if you can, what you need to do is don't duplicate your effort. Don't do a project and then just try and get a publication and a poster and everything else out of it. If you can, target something that's going to be a publication and get it published at the highest level you can. And then for a separate project, aim for something that you're going to do as a poster or a presentation and do that. You don't have to do a whole other QI project. It could be something else, something that's easier and quicker in terms of time. But if you can be efficient about just getting 1 of each thing at the highest level and having 1 per year, then you tick all the boxes without having to duplicate your effort over and over again. And this is where, again, I'd be really meticulous about saying in the domain form at the beginning, this is the evidence that I'm putting forward for this section. And this is why I think I should score it. And one of the best ones I saw said, this is what I'm putting forward for this. This is what I am not putting forward for this. I do not want you to look at this audit and that audit and all the rest of it, which is brilliant because then you go straight to it, you look at it, you say, what level was it presented at? And then you give them the marks. And you don't have to troll through all the other audits and presentations and things that they've done. So be really overt and obvious about what you're asking the examiner to look at or the assessor to look at for that section. Next slide, please. Outside activities. So this is a grey area. I think the key points are it's organisation rather than participation. There has to be some kind of evidence. So I did see lots of explanations of things that people had done, but it was just them writing something down. Now that's good, and an explanation is important, but you do need something that from someone else objectively that says they did this. Again, this is another area where the TPD forms can be very useful. I don't want to give the TPDs thousands of pieces of paper to fill in, but if you have done something within your region, then this is the sort of thing where having someone objectively say, you know, I agree that they did this, fulfilled this role for this number of months or weeks or years, signed by such and so, then it makes it very easy. You don't have to engage too much brain in figuring out what level that comes at. And then exceptional commitment, the difference between 3 and 5, it's not really defined, but as Matt was talking about, the suggested areas are the length of commitment and what actually the roles are. So if you think you're on the borderline, this is the time to really big yourself up, to grit your teeth and feel a bit of a cheesy whatever, and just say, this is exactly what I did for this is how long I did it for, and this is why I think this is exceptional commitment. Makes you feel a bit uncomfortable, but important to, this is the area where you are allowed to push it and see what happens. And that's all, that's the end of my talk. Thank you very much for listening.
That was brilliant. That was really useful. Thanks, Steve. So finally, we've got